Hi, thanks everyone for rejoining together, and I was really thrilled to be here for today's and also to listen to talks yesterday of Katarina, of Timotheus, and of Jussi, who were quite invigorating, and all the comments from Rosie, Maria, and everyone else, because I really have questions with these issues and really to a certain extent obsessed by them while not having answers to many of them. I was not supposed to have any regular paper or talk. Nevertheless, I will make some comments which are rather positioned as questions without answers, or interventions into this condition that we are discussing here, the human posthuman. I did two conferences in November and in July previous year, and one of them was dedicated to avant-garde, Russian avant-garde practices, and also those practices that were repositioning human capacities in social engineering, in outer space, in art and culture, and in political context, also connected with Marxist and socialist condition. And the other one was some sort of effort to reconsider not post-humanist but the human condition in a new way, which again recurred to this term inhuman, claiming that it's not possible to use this lexicon of and lexeme or definition human, but consider the human conditions as inhuman. And I will be a bit ruminating on this, disjunctions and contradictions. So we know that the issue of human as some kind of program and project starts from Renaissance times, and the traditional comme il faut idea is that it is positioned in Renaissance period, in Renaissance art, and it launches new secularism. So it's the generation of the secular world as against the previous scholastic, theological, and theocratic condition. And everyone agrees that this is the birth of a human being per se, some kind of microcosm reflecting the macrocosm. Nevertheless, if we look at certain important researches, I mean, such research of a human body and dichotomy of human body and soul as l'homme by Descartes, or research of the human body much earlier by Leonardo da Vinci, we see that the situation by establishing the new ethical and new ontological paradigm as the human being occupying the center is not so simple. Why? Because if we look at the treatise by Descartes, L'Homme, we see that actually what he is describing is an animated automata. Is an automated corpse. I mean, the human body is already a mechanism, is already a machine. If we look at the research and the artistic research of Leonardo da Vinci, and we are quite accustomed to see this Vitruvian man as the jubilation of the birth of new human centrism, But at the same time, if we look at his exercise, how he works with corpses, he works with dead bodies. His constructivism of a human kind and human subject is stemming from anatomy, and anatomy starts with a dead body. So this issue of dichotomy of the soul that has to animate body and the dead body that has to be anatomized and mechanized and automatized is already there in European philosophy, and so this generation of the human being takes place with the murdering of the human being. So it happens at the same time. So by one hand, giving birth to this new humanist microcosm, and by another already positioning that it is by the same gesture killing the possibility of the human. So this is a very impaired human being, already having this crack and dichotomy of this insolvable dualism that we were discussing, meta and concept, material and metaphysical, immanent and transcendental, thing in itself and practical. So, and actually Spinozist effort was exactly this effort to solve this this gap, this rupture that was there in positioning of a human being. But I will skip immediately after Spinoza to Marx to claim that because Katerina Kolosova started yesterday from Marx, from his alternative or radical project of humanism, which had never been accomplished, and which had been accomplished as a social experiment but ended up in different kinds of totalitarian conditions and ideologies. Nevertheless, I think if we look at Marx and his references, then what he does is a very wonderful thing, that he dialecticizes Spinoza and Spinozizes Hegel. And actually Marx was this very ardent effort and endeavor to coin and to converge these two, at first sight, impossible thinking paradigms. Nevertheless, I will try to show how it could have been possible. Actually, Marx completely agrees with this condition that thought is the attribute of substance, and this is the condition of Spinoza, that substance and nature already contains thought as its capacity, as its attribute. And this already is the condition of non-division and of this non-dialectical monistic empiricism. Nevertheless, what Marx adds and what is then completely borrowed by Marxism in socialist condition and socialist context, and borrowed to a considerable extent in many Marxist theories is that, yes, it's true that thinking is the attribute of nature, and then this solves all the problems of human being as externality, which can, I don't know, fall apart from the natural development. But nevertheless, Marx adds that this is not just nature, because nature is not a non-developing, naturphilosophical, everlasting and non-changeable substance, but it is also developing in time. So nature is something that gets extended into historicizing, and thought is the extension of nature only if thought is generated by labor, and labor cannot be generated without human being. So thought is part of nature, but as something that is generated by labor, by the token of being generated by man. And only in this sense there is this monism. But this monism at the same time presupposes contradiction and dialectics, because labor gets alienated and on the one hand. On the other hand, what is amazing with Marx in this endeavor to connect historical condition, deep time condition, the human being and nature, and connect it with the development and labor, is that he claims that human being is never an externality to nature. So, history being developed as human labor and human alienation remains to be part of nature. And the fact that the human being is changing nature as is developing as a thinking subject is never stopping to be nature. In this sense, the idea of Hegel that there is an absolute spirit, but absolute spirit and logic cannot do without development of natural world, and cannot but be reflected by absolute spirit, is a very important condition for Marx, because he just overturns this, because he claims that it is not that absolute spirit conditions itself by nature, but nature is consciousness. So this Deleuzian unconscious that we claim as the clamor, as the Spinozist monism, is exactly this primary consciousness of the general, this consciousness that from which everything evolves. Labor evolves, man evolves, and man, by this token, never stops to be part of nature. Only nature is already mediated by labor. So the question that Marx puts, can we make a question about this unmediated nature? So can we have any ecosophy without first claiming the conditions of labor, the conditions of private property? And that's why what is he claiming is that this dichotomy between organic body of man and inorganic body of man. And this is one thing, this is one nature. But the history is that inorganic body of man, which is nature, became an alienated capital. It is alienated by labor. And that's why I completely agree that this Anthropocene and Capitalocene condition is this alienated inorganic body of man, which otherwise could have been claimed in this monistic, unified condition. Nevertheless, at the same time, the contradictory point is that unmediated natural state is not possible. So whether this alienation of labor makes possible the naturalizing of nature as if this alienation had never happened. This is one premise, and I just don't have time to elaborate. I just try to make it. Another premise is the condition that we had in Russian avant-garde, really, which was an extreme period of experimentation exactly with human nature, with labor, with all those social bio. It was just the flourishing of biopolitical experimentations. And in all experiments that ever happened in Russian avant-garde, for instance, we had Bogdanov's empiriomonism, which is intersecting very much with Spinozist issues. His idea was techtology, where he tried to connect molecular biological constructions with the social organization and to stop to differentiate and divide between biological constructions and social constructions. Plus Russian cosmism, which was trying to invade outer space with new humanity, transform humanity, robotize humanity, machinize humanity to the extent that humankind would make an evolutionary leap that would not happen only by the token of social revolution and liberation from exploitation and capitalist state and capitalist condition, but also by the biopolitical change of consciousness and body needs. And this, strangely, in the avant-garde presupposed almost angelic human being that doesn't need any sex, that doesn't need any food, that doesn't need any nourishment, but that is becoming the spirit as body or body as spirit. Or rather intelligence, some kind of intelligence that only needs some general common cause of the allgemeine, overall humanity together. And there were just very funny ideas of humankind getting to noosphere, whereas the earth is remaining for the benefit of animals, plants, and geological issues. So this the human being was claimed as extraterrestrial, so extra geo, whereas geo was remaining part of this noosphere and cosmic space. But my point here is not this versatility of experimentation, but rather the fact that despite any transpositions of human capacities, be it body, be it brain, be it ethics, be it sexuality, which was a big experiment also. The lexeme and the definition human was never disputed. So whatever happened with human being, whatever mutation was developing in a human being, like he is or he or she is changing the gender, becoming transgender, becoming desexualized, becoming white humanity, as Malevich was claiming it. The name human is not evacuated and is not obsolete. And for me, this is the question: why they needed this term still to preserve it and to retain its application. I think that the idea was again this progressist development and progressist enhancement of human capacities, so that any inhuman capacities are inscribed into human capacities. So this older and most important philosophical endeavor, starting with idealism, that the transcendental and transcendent should somehow become of the human condition, and human is human, but at the same time he should go beyond, and this beyond is part of the human, is already human. So the inhuman is already human. So why call him inhuman and posthuman if he's already inhuman? With all the history of these transversions and transgressions of the human limitations, starting from metaphysics and up to social engineering and the scientific transformation. This is the question that I don't know the answer to either. But again, when we were yesterday talking about what kind of post-human, is it overhuman, is it superhuman or pre-human or something else than human? How to define this? Good post-human or bad post-human? Like exploited and humiliated post-human, and post-human because it is subaltern and subjugated, or post-human because it is liberated? So these questions still remain, and actually the cyborgic post-humanity or post-human condition that post-structuralism developed in Deleuzian and Guattarian theory, also in their references to Gabriel Tarde, this was definitely a completely different post-humanity than what is claimed in avant-garde, because if the avant-garde transhuman is some kind of biorobotic overhuman, the contingent Deleuzian Guattarian posthuman is a techno-natural immanent assemblage. And I think that the great contributions of the semiology, or the critique of semiology and a critique of semiotics and the signifier was extremely important here. Because what was the great discovery of Deleuzian and Guattarian critique was the farewell to the signifier. It meant that not only the signified is abolished, but that the difference between a thing, an apparatus, a machine, a word is completely dissolved. And this semiological dissolution enabled and facilitated new coinages within immanent structures. And then this could have worked in extensions and in new organic, post-organic, machinic organic, and biotechno constellations. And here also I have question: what instigates these coinages, and for what aim are these coinages made? I mean, yes, we are used to say that we don't need teleology and we don't need any expediency in terms of we don't need some kind of aim ahead of us. But nevertheless, what I can see as this instigating practice of this new biotechno contingent assemblages is desire, is this post-libidinal desire. Maybe Rosie would correct me if I'm wrong here. But the question here for me again is if we are within this condition of immanent assemblages, of hybridities, how in this hybridized condition we construct subjectivity to emancipate other, and if the other is also in this hybridized assemblage, why this other would need emancipation? So if life is just life without certain dramatized rupture, how to question and how to condition who violates what, who kills who, and who kills and who conditions violence and who dies and who exceeds this collapse. And my favorite passage is when Rosie is talking about dying and this life extensivity with dying and despite dying, which you develop in nomadic ethics. And I completely share it and I agree with this. But then, for me, there would be the contradiction also between Guattari and Deleuze, which I don't know whether I'm right in this question or not, because we have Deleuze of these multiplicities, this clamor of assemblages and the freedom of this and the courage of this dissipation and dispersal, and some kind of optimism. But this optimism is not the optimism that is the responsibility for some kind of general issue. When I take responsibility for the others, I can myself may become minority, but I don't understand how to claim the issue of the general, of the organization of the general condition, common interest. I can imagine how to disperse and courageously face decomposition and claim it is a preservation of life, but I cannot imagine how to emancipate the other in this condition. And definitely here comes this Nietzschean element in Deleuze, which is much more explicit in Deleuze than in Guattari, because I mean this this nature, for instance, this naturphilosophical nature where Empedocles, you remember this play by Hölderlin, the death of Empedocles. Empedocles is saying farewell to social, to people, to socium, and is jumping into Etna, the volcano. So he's perishing, and on the one hand you can claim, and he's the poet, so on the one hand you can claim that he's dissipating and dissolving in this natural philosophical immanence, but at the same time, where is this decision to say farewell to socium, and to say farewell to that socium which is too what? Too banal? Why is he saying farewell to socium? Why is he jumping to Etna? So there is this moment of hiatus and hubris. Hiatus and hubris, which is not explicit for me if we only imagine mere dynamics of immanences, but this very act when there is decision to jump. This is this act of hubris, which is very Nietzschean and very tragic with Deleuze, and therefore for me there is this contradiction within Deleuze also between mere immanences, but also with his such terms of his as event, which is extra being, not just being but extra being, and which is empirical but transcendental at the same time, and this coinage of transcendental empiricism. And this weird vitalism with the background of extreme Nietzschean pessimism, without which Deleuze becomes just Latour, because we need this extremity, Nietzschean extremity. And again, I have no answer here, but the next premise. And the last premise probably would be a very strange treatise written in the 70s by a Marxist philosopher, Soviet philosopher, Evald Ilyenkov, who started as Spinozist. But of course, being Marxist, he had to go very deeply into Hegel. So he again was just reproducing this coinage of Hegel and Spinoza. And he wrote a treatise, which is not a theoretical treatise, but it stands apart from his theoretical work. It's called Phantasmagoria, Cosmology of Spirit. And he starts by the fact that the humankind, and not only humankind, but the whole solar system and Earth is eclipsed, is extinct. His question is, so we know that this is the premise from which speculative realism starts, and what was on Earth when human mind never existed? So human mind is not able to cover this ancestrality that preceded human mind, and this post-cestrality or post-terrestriality that will also exceed human mind, because human mind is limited and it's finite. And human presence on Earth is also finite. But their position is, speculative realists' position is radically non-Spinozist, because if Spinoza claims that human mind is the attribute of nature, then human mind, and thinking is something that nature needs. So idea and thinking and thought is something that is prescribed by nature and its presence. And hence the human existence, as well as its transhuman or posthuman or whatever, is also prescribed by nature. But what Ilyenkov is claiming is that, yes, definitely, first of all, human being is not an Aristotelian human being, an animal that is acquiring the thinking capacity, but it is the capacity of thought which he Spinozistically claims as inevitable and indispensable part of nature. So what happens if nature dispenses itself with human being? What does it just stop to think, or should we have to stop claiming that human condition ever existed? And his answer is that the starting point should be the end. The starting point should be the eclipse of human thinking, and as well as eclipse of human being. Which is, nevertheless, as he claims it, a creative process. So the fact that the human mind can imagine its own eclipse is already creative, is already the capacity of human being. So the only being that can imagine its own posthuman is again human. The only being that can imagine its animalization is human. And as Hegel said, the only animal that knows that he's animal is human. The animals don't know that they are animals. And therefore, imagining this eclipse is already the act of big natural generosity given as thought. But at the same time, he is claiming that it is a creative act, even the extinction of human mind and human being, because nature cannot exist without generating such the capacity of thinking in any other system within solar system or within non-solar system. So thinking is something that will ever be with the matter, because matter cannot do without thinking. And if thinking as the part of human body and human society is being extinct, then thinking can generate itself somewhere else. And it, even if it is not a human creature that is developing thinking capacity in some other non-solar system, still it rather confirms human condition than rejects it or dismisses it, because human condition is capacity to think for the sake of the common, because thinking is claimed as the thought is claimed as the. This is another thing to explain with give explication about thinking capacity is some kind of claiming of the general cause of the human social presence, because thinking is the extension of non-alienated and de-alienated labor. So actually communism is some kind of effectuation of human thought. Human thought being effectuation of nature, and communism will inevitably perish because humankind will perish, but nevertheless, this is the cycle which is implementing and fulfilling this human condition, because thinking and thought had ever been conditioned by this necessity for the common cause. And I will give at the end a little example of what this term general and common means, because there is big misunderstanding, like common, is it universal? If it's universal, then it's bad because it's ideology. Common, it's communism, then it's some kind of, I don't know, historical communism, and again, totality or whatever. General is some kind of invariant, and then it's not versatility and it's not pluriversality. And he gives a very curious example for general. He's saying that two tables or two things, well, things with same attribute, this is what we think that is general, or the invariant of something, like Mozart, Hebels, and Beethoven are all humans because they have some general capacities. In Aristotelian sense, they are all human beings and there's no big difference between them. But he is saying that a book and a reader and a chair and a table, something that are coined and attracted by mutual lack, are much more general than things that have the same attributes. So generality is conditioned as some kind of mutual need. I would end up here, and maybe if there are questions.